Hello, it's Devin Nash with a question from our mastermind at Patreon from Persu. Hey, Devin, I have a question about recent mastermind. In the on-off strategy for work, that's a strategy I'll review just in a sec. One of the most important strategies I think I've ever found for working. What about switching to off? How do you prioritize and time manage a bunch of stuff like socializing, hobbies, learning, self-reflection, etc.? And how does exercise fit in? So we'll talk about how to kind of create a rounded life if you want to be within the top 1% of what you do. And also if you don't, starting with a review of the on-off principle, which really is just simply, right, if you are working, you are in an on state. Okay, what's an on state? Which means absolutely no distractions and totally focused on solving the number one problem in front of you that you've identified. And that's it. That's what on is. And then off is likely just completely off. You're not working, you're not thinking about work, you're doing something else. Why is this important? Because we usually sit in a sort of like wishy-washy state with like 3 monitors, a bunch of tabs open, music going. It's okay if you have music going. Some people are good with music, some people aren't. YouTube video, and people wonder why they're not really effective. And I actually argue that in this day and age with like AI and automation, you can build millions of dollars of business in just 4 to 6 hours a day of real true on work. The difference is that most people are working like 10, 12 hours a day. Like we are in this hustle grind culture, especially in entrepreneurship, where the idea is that you're supposed to be working on your business, working on things as much as possible and always like growing and learning, etc. Instead of taking time off and doing things that you might want to do or that might provide you more enjoyment. And thus this like on state is encouraged all the time, but nobody's actually working. Like they're all just like messing around. So we're going to talk about some of the like balancing structures and like how to kind of get all this together. So that's the on off state. So the question here is you switch to off, like, okay, well then what? Like how does your life actually like pan out and work? And I'll discuss what I do. And I want to start with this really depends on what level you want to get to in certain things. So I think you can probably truly master 2 to 3 things at a time in your life. And I consider finances and like building a successful business as like one of those things. So for me, the 2 that I am really trying to maximize are my business and my personal fitness and health. Those are the 2 I'm really trying to and everything else has to get managed. And if you draw like a pie chart, you're just managing everything, and everything's just a balance of those 2 things. So let's go like one by one. The first thing is just because you're in an off state and you just like you shut off, you say, okay, I'm not going to be working on my business, or I'm not going to be working on this specific thing, I'll be doing something else, doesn't mean you don't have to be scheduled. And I think that if you truly want to reach mastery, this is for people that really want to reach mastery in their life. You don't have to do this if you don't want to do that. And it's fine if you don't want to do that. But if you really want to be the top 1% of something, or like top 0.001% of something, which is like, if you look at the top 1% of people that are earning in America, like the richest country on earth for now, they're making $400,000 a year. So you want to be at 1%. That means like 1 in every 100 people you meet, right? Or you want to be like 1% in like lifting weights, for example, or fitness, where 99 people you meet are not going to be at that caliber. You have to make sacrifices that those 99 people are not willing to make. That's the only way to get there, right? You have to do something those 99 people aren't doing. So I think the first thing that most people don't do is they don't like really think about and schedule things. So I'm going to copy and paste my calendar, just like an example day from like a template in my calendar. So just to kind of like show you what I mean. So this portion of the day will go from 1 to from 12 a.m. to like 12 to 8. Like I'm sleeping, and then when I wake up, once I get to work, I'm doing the most critical task I possibly can, the hardest thing I can possibly do, and then I'll work all the way through until usually 6 p.m. or so. Like I'll work like really, really hard from 9 to 6. And again, like people will be like, oh, like you're not working 12 hours a day. What the hell? Yeah, I still run a multi-million-dollar business. Want to know how? Because I'm actually working. Like I'm actually like really focusing that time. All right. So then I'll do like my hot yoga usually, or training of some kind, dinner. This is the time I'll spend with my family at the end of the day. And then I'll cool down and like go to bed. Cool? Okay. So I still regiment my time, and I want to address like each one of these questions kind of separately. What I think for what I need to do and who I need to be, I have to schedule this time. But I want to address like each one of these things because I think a lot of people, especially younger people, will have like questions about like how to do each of these things. So we'll start with socializing. And my actual advice now, again, keep in mind this is for people that are looking for the top 1%. Depending on like what your goals are or whatnot, you can sort of tailor this to where you want to be. And you don't have to do these things if like you don't want top 50% or top 75%, whatever. Don't right. Like I just don't think that anybody that is like going out drinking or like going to bars or like hitting up the parties, I just don't think those people are in the top 1%. Very, very rarely. There's a lot of there's a problem here because in the business culture, there's like a lot of these like suit and tie people that are attending every convention and they look like really successful. But in reality, they're like employed by someone or like which is fine, but like they're not actually like financially or like career driven on their way to like really becoming the top 1%. There are some exceptions to this and a few people that do hit that scene that are quite good. But for the most part, these are kind of posers. Really, the people that are succeeding are not really socializing at a high level. The difference here is like their version of socializing is the equivalent of like masterminds, small masterminds, and spending time with other people reviewing their success points. So like if you're a YouTuber, for example, hanging out with 5 other YouTubers and discussing what works and what doesn't would be their socializing. And you're going to see this consistently across all of these categories that I cover, that generally people who are really successful are going to be shaping these categories into sort of, quote, productive things that they also enjoy. So you'll see this actually most apparently in hobbies. Like, so for me, for hobbies, I usually coincide these with training, right? So for me, a hobby is yoga, right? A hobby is weightlifting. A hobby is running. A hobby is jiu-jitsu. Lots of my hobbies, you'll notice, actually all my hobbies basically are, except video games, which is just one that I'll like have recreationally. All of these are also exercise. So they also like fit in with like growth and all the other like good stuff. But also keep in mind that I also want to be a top 1% of fitness. So that's also why I have to have all my hobbies this way. So you can like section out some of these hobbies if you don't want to do that, right? Learning, I think, kind of happens like 2 ways. First of all, there's a thing called net time. This is something that like changed my life with learning, which is if you're walking to work or you're driving or you're spending some time on the bus or you're in transit somewhere, most people can benefit by like listening to a podcast. It's like educational, just getting into the frame of like listening to something or listening to an audiobook or something. So net time is really good. I also think you should have a scheduled dedicated time. So for me, this is 30 minutes a day where you are actively listening and taking notes plus like reading something that's like high value. So like a course or like a really high quality, like bestseller book or something. We're really trying to learn the material and you're not just on net time, just kind of listening to it. So if I'm listening to like podcasts, I'll just listen to podcasts whenever that I think can like help me with my growth. But if I find like a book or a resource that I know will just like catapult me because it's just how high quality it is, I will put that in a dedicated time slot. And that's learning. And I also want to say, well, okay, we'll actually cover that in a little bit later. Self-reflection and spiritual growth. I mean, for me, this is just meditation, and I just schedule it. I schedule it after every exercise thing for like 15 minutes a day. And exercise I don't need to worry about because I already do it within my hobbies. So I will say something about transitionary time. This is something that like nobody really transitionary. I can't spell that, so we'll call it something else. Transition. I can't spell it if I try. Okay, I did it. All right, transitioning time is 2 things that I notice when I'm reviewing a lot of people's schedules and like people that like are not where they want to be. They usually have 2 really big problems. The first one is that at least 2 hours of their time is lost in like random pauses and so things like checking phone when getting up or going to bed, like just like sitting, like really like nobody ever talks about this stuff, right? But like and then like the time in between activities. So for example, like this is a really like weird subjective thing that might be why people don't like really talk about it a lot. But let's say that like you cook dinner for yourself, you go eat, and then between you eating and then washing dishes, there's like a 30-minute pause. Just because like you're sitting watching an extra episode on TV, or you're just kind of chilling out, or like whatever, just like time is going by. That time in between activities adds up, and for most people, it's hours and hours and hours a day. So there's stats on this, right? So we know that like the average person uses their phone for like 6 to 7 hours a day. It's like a crazy amount of time, right? But even if it's 2 hours, that's 8% of a 24-hour day, and you're already losing a bunch to sleep. So a lot of people, where they catch themselves is if they wake up, like, okay, I'll check social media for a while. Like, even 30 minutes of that, both ends, is 4% of your day, right? So if you're and like most people are much worse about it. Okay, so don't do that. Like, just get up and go, right? Just get up and start your thing. Don't look at all of those little pauses throughout your day, and you will actually claim a ton of time back, because most people have a ton of time like transitioning between activities. You come to work, you sit down, and now you're like journaling or reading or catching up or whatever you're doing, right? Like, just be really, really aware of the time that you're taking to do those things and that transitionary time in between those two things. And then just cut that out. Like you don't need it. That's usually the stuff you're doing that you also feel the worst about too. It's usually the stuff that's like, oh, that's like the social media time that I really shouldn't be spending doing those things. So you just don't do those things. And you have to, if you want to operate on like at a pretty high level, you have to really start sacrificing on so many different levels. Like it's hard to describe how much you kind of have to, like, quotations, like, give up in order to like really master even one thing. Like if you look at like, and that's the thing too, is like true masters, like they don't have time for like two things. Like I can do fitness and I can do business, and like everything else suffers. Like my relationship suffers a lot, my family life suffers a lot, my social life is non-existent. I don't talk to anybody, and all of my hobbies are just around fitness so that I can fit in that time. So like there's no, like, these people that this is another thing that like people need to learn, is like the people that are trying to be, I come across like people like this all the time that are like, you're trying to do like 3 or 4 things, like you're screwed. Like there's no way you can do it. There's just not enough time to really, really be good at something, to be exceptional at something, to do like 3, 4, 5 things, right? The top entrepreneurs in the world that are like billionaires have no life whatsoever besides their business. All they do. They have no family life. They have like record numbers of divorce. Like they can't, you can't do it, right? So I think where you have to end up is like somewhere in here where, and that's why I think on and off states are so important, because if I didn't have that on off where I just switched off and I truly stopped working so I could focus on these other activities, I would have no life. I'd just like work all the time and be like super miserable, but I wouldn't really be working. I would be in this sort of like zombie state, because I'm convinced that like I've never seen a human that can like truly work and solve a problem for like longer than like, I'm being so generous when I say 7 to 8 hours a day. I don't believe you could show me someone that does it for 6. There are people like there's all kinds of different types of work. So people can work, 12 hours, 14 hours a day on a factory line. People can work cleaning. People can work in construction. There's a lot of like really tough jobs that require very high hours. You could also work in like a management position, hustling around to meetings. You could work like 12, 14 hours a day. That's fine, right? But I'm saying to do the real cerebral work that is going to move your life forward, your career forward, to do the real work that's like putting a project out into the creation, right? We talked about creation versus consumption. A lot of people think they're like busy because they go to a lot of meetings, they answer a lot of phone calls, and like very rarely does this like actually translate into like something in the world, like a deal or like something that exists, versus actually like sitting cerebrally and creating a new thing. Like this is a new project that people can do. This is a new video that people can consume. That you cannot do that. Like I don't know a single person doing that for like 6, 7 hours a day. Even like the best YouTubers and content creators in the world that I know work like 2 or 3 or 4 hours a day on the actual like filming, the actual like creation of it, and then everything else is like meetings and like planning it and like moving people around and stuff like that. So you should like get in your mind, it's like, okay, I'm really gonna try to like, and if you're starting from like 0 like I was, you don't start with like, oh, I'm gonna like have this 8-hour day scheduled, right? Like I showed you on my calendar. like I'm gonna have 4 hours, like from 12 to 4 p.m. for example, a time I know I can't be interrupted, or from 6 to 8, like whatever you can do, right? I am just going to work on this, and then I'm gonna spend my off state. Like I might spend some time really thinking about what that problem I need to solve is, right? Because a lot of people are just like, oh well, so you're saying that if I'm a live streamer for content creation, for example, then all I need to do is just work from like 12 to 4, but I'll do my live stream as best I can possible. Nope, because that's like a huge waste of time. You're not thinking about the number one problem you actually need to do, which is get attention on you, get viewers, get brand. For that, you need to be actually creating like really high quality stuff that's in video format. You have to create really high quality stuff, and this is really hard, right? No one wants to do that, like really cerebral work. So that you need to dedicate that specific time to, and then you're off, right? And you can do your other things. And from there, it just kind of becomes a weighing game of like how much you really want to succeed at these things, and then cutting out all of the things that you don't really need, right? So for me, I've cut a lot of things that I would love to do in my life. Like there's companies I'd love to advise for, there's video games I'd love to play, there's all kinds of stuff, but to do this at this stage of my life, this is what I have to do. So I think that should kind of help prioritize your time management, that just because you're in kind of like an off state, like not thinking about things, doesn't mean like you don't have to like discipline and like schedule and other things. But I certainly have like, I'd say a pretty good amount of time where I absolutely do just absolutely nothing, like generally play video games or things like that. That's usually like a few hours at night, which still like generally ends up like comprising like 20% of my day or something. Also, I also believe in like working in stints. So like, if you are going to work like 4 hours, I think you should work like 2 with like a 20 or 30 or even an hour break, and then work another 2. Again, like a lot of people will hear this and be like, this is so much less work than I thought you do, or that really successful people do. But I cannot stress enough that so many people are just hopelessly distracted. Like it is a epidemic. It is a disease. Truly, it is a disease. Distraction is a total disease. And people are just not effective. They're just not working at the effectiveness that they can work at. And you get these hustle culture people that are like, well, what if I work hard and smart? And then turns out you can't do that. If you work that hard and you're really working, you'll fry out. In the same way that's like, just think about it, right? Like think about it in the same way as like physical activity, where it's like, okay, it'd be like someone coming in and being like, oh, you deadlift for like 5 sets for like 8 reps. Well, I'm going to deadlift 20 sets for 15 reps. And it's like, dude, you'll die, right? Like you just don't have the same, you just don't have the capacity. Like you will fry, right? And in exactly the same way, like people that try to think that they can do that mentally just end up kidding themselves. They end up putting themselves in this place where it's a delusion, really, where they always feel like they're being productive, but they're never actually doing anything measurable. And then you find that they purposely don't measure things so that they can avoid thinking about that. And then when somebody pulls them up and is like, hey, you're actually not being productive, right? They're like, shit, right? You don't see it in their revenue per year. You don't see it in like the products they're creating in their following and things like that, right? It doesn't show up. So yeah, so that's my kind of like thing about like working in time management, stuff like that. Hopefully that helps. I think that's all I have to say about this for now. See you guys for the next video. Thanks everybody. Bye.